Growing up, my dad never took us hunting. He took us fishing because he was a fisherman, but not a hunter. I actually started shooting guns around the age of 14. My neighbor had a shotgun and we would go shoot in the woods at whatever. I think I shot a pheasant one time that at least knocked it to the ground before it ran away. We tried to shoot some ducks once or twice, but to no avail. I shot competition shooting with .22s a couple of times and found that I was a pretty good shot. Now, after moving to the White Mountains, I had someone in my church who decided they were going to make me the great white hunter. So I put in for an elk tag and received one for hunting a cow elk. It's a female. I had a few guns, but nothing large enough to take down an elk, so he loaned me his .30-06. We went out and shot it a few times so I could get used to the gun. The hunt was for 5 days in late October. He told me that the elk would still be high in the mountains, between 8,000 and 10,000 feet, because it hadn't gotten cold enough to have the watering holes freeze over. At least not as much that they couldn't break through the ice with their hooves. So we went out and started trying to find elk. We listened for bull elk bugling, trying to attract the females. We looked for fresh tracks and elk droppings, but really found nothing. So we drove all the dirt roads and trails trying to find an elk to shoot. Now, I only lived 45 minutes away from where we were hunting, so I went home and slept in a warm bed every night. But on the third day, it was getting close to the end of the day, and we heard some elk bugling. So we walked through some woods and saw an opening that had an area of about 150 yards across with an animal trail in the middle. We knew that this was an area that elk moved through. So we decided to wait and see if any would come through. After about an hour, a cloud descended on top of the trees and it started to snow. We looked at each other and was starting to decide whether to leave because the sun was going down or to stay a little longer when we heard a branch break somewhere. Now, if you've ever been in the mountains during the snow, you know how quiet it gets. Something was coming. I set the end of the rifle on a branch and looked through the scope. I started moving it to the right and to the left to see what was making the noise. Then all of a sudden, a huge bull elk walked right out in front of us. Now the problem was I had a cow elk tag, not a bull tag. 3 days of nothing, and the first thing I could really have a real chance to shoot was a bull. All of the cartoons you've ever seen of an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder became a reality for me. One part of me was saying, shoot it and worry about making it a cow later. The other part was saying, you can't. Back and forth the thoughts went in my head. Now, what I was experiencing was temptation. James says, so humble yourselves before God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Come close to God and he will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, for your loyalty is divided between God and the world. Let there be tears for what you have done. Let there be sorrow and deep grief. Let there be sadness instead of laughter, and gloom instead of joy. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up in honor. James gives 3 steps to overcome temptation. The first step is to step down. You step down as the CEO of your life. When I saw the elk, I was faced with this decision. Do I make the decision as the CEO of my life or an employee? If I'm a CEO, then I'm free to choose. As the employee, I have to submit to the boss. Well, who's the boss? Well, God, the Father, is the boss. What he says goes. So the first thing you do to overcome temptation is to step down as CEO. The next step is to step up and say no to the devil. When my finger was on the trigger, the devil told me how to get away with it. All I had to do was gut the elk and cut its head off. No one's going to know that it was a bull elk. If you want to overcome temptation, you have to step up and say no to the devil's ways. The next step is to step into a closer relationship with God. I walked away disappointed at the missed opportunity. When I talked to the Lord about it, he said, I've got you covered. Now, I was so glad I didn't shoot. And I'm glad that I stepped into a closer relationship. In fact, I shot an elk on the last day of the hunt. After I shot that elk, I was faced with a whole new temptation. Now, that's a story for a different day. I mention it because James starts off saying, humble yourselves before God, and he ends by saying, humble yourselves before God. So how you overcome temptation is to step down as CEO of your life, step up and say no to the devil, step into a closer relationship with God, then repeat. Temptation is not sin, but it will always be trying to get you there. So calibrate daily by stepping down, stepping up, and stepping in. So until next week, remember, don't just take life as it comes, calibrate and shape it as you go. Thank you for following Calibrate. Share it with someone you know. Take a moment and review us and give us a good rating on iTunes, Google Play, Facebook, or YouTube.